me. First of all, I'm Alex. I'm the current chair of the UCSB Comm Alumni Council, and we basically are here to connect you as students and alumni back with each other and the mission of the department at large. And we do that in a variety of different ways. One of which is through this virtual career series. It started, and I'll share my screen while I'm chatting about this. It started last year in the midst of COVID, when we couldn't get together for last year's Comm Career Day. And so we thought of, how can we kind of replicate some of that experience virtually to make sure that we're connecting with students and sharing stories. And so we put this together. We do it every month for an hour, or about 45 minutes. And we definitely encourage you to keep an eye on the website for the upcoming sessions, as there will be more. Here we go. Here's a lot of the ones that we've had. Here's Debbie here. Next one's June 23rd. So before I turn it over to Debbie, let me just make sure that my screens are all lined up. So today we're going to hear from Debbie. I will be taking some notes as far as questions to ask throughout, but again, as I mentioned, please feel free to post in the chat as Debbie is speaking through her story. We'll circle back to those questions, and then at the end we'll have some time for you all to jump in. Great. So with that, Ron.
Yeah, just before you start, for everybody, Debbie has been extremely generous, and she has agreed to share her PowerPoint slide. So afterwards, I will put this on the website, so you don't have to feel compelled to take specific notes, but everything she say will transform your life. So pay attention.
I mean, big time. Pay attention. Just kidding. Well, what an honor, truly, to be here. I was part of the Comm alumni group for about a year, and COVID hit, and not in that capacity, maybe in the future, but was so honored to be asked to do this so I can continue to be a part of this wonderful group. I would say that when I graduated from UC Santa Barbara in 1992, I would have loved to have this resource and these wonderful people who care so much about me and my career. So I will just say next slide, if that's okay, as we go along. So a little bit about myself. I'm dating myself big time when I put up the rental rates in Isla Vista that were in 1988, 89. As you see, that's quite a bit different than when I started in 1988, graduated in 1992. I am one half of Fitzgerald Peterson Communications. You see my lovely partner there, Reagan. So I'm Debbie Fitzgerald, she's Reagan Peterson, and we started our agency almost 16 years ago now. So we make up Fitzgerald Peterson Communications. I am a graduate with a BA of Communication. Had to put a few things up here. Freebirds literally is still something that my friends from college and I talk about literally every time we're together. So I had to put a picture of Freebirds. I don't know what it is about it, but I think I have dreams about it. So, and every time I go to Isla Vista, my husband kind of doesn't get it. He's like, again, we've got to get one of those burritos. I'm like, okay, you just don't understand. I lived at Francisco Torres, which I now know has completely changed names and is owned by the university. My father and my mom and father dropped me off at Francisco Torres and immediately were completely jealous that I got to live there for 4 years and couldn't believe they were paying for me to have a pool and an on-site pizza joint. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Next slide. And I will say, if there's a question you have as I'm going through this, I want this to be interactive. Please feel free to just jump in and say, whoa, 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 I got a question. I just wanted to go through here a little bit and talk about how I did get to Fitzgerald Peterson Communications and owning my own PR agency. I will say I was a little lost going into college. I wasn't sure what I even wanted my major to be. I didn't become a communication major until my junior year at UC Santa Barbara, just after they changed the requirements, which I could have just kicked myself, but looking back on it, probably just fine. I had a little extra challenge to become a communication graduate. So when I was at UC Santa Barbara, I started to really think I wanted to be in the news business. So I really wanted to be an anchor reporter. So I wasn't sure, but I thought that's what I wanted to do. So I knew that right away in the summers, I needed to get as many internships and entry-level jobs as possible, which I did get a job with the chamber at Santa Barbara. It was a non-paid internship for credit. And they put me on a cute little a TV type show that we recorded downtown in Santa Barbara about what the chamber was doing. And that's kind of where I really started to get the bug, that I thought, oh man, I want to be on TV, and I'm going to be this big news anchor someday and reporter. I came back in the summer here in Denver and was at our 9 News affiliate, which is now NBC. It was a couple of radio shows that I did internships with, and was at CBS Denver and the local Denver station, and had internships again, and really fell in love with the thought that I was going to be on air. This was going to be what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Well, as we all know, life throws us curveballs, and certainly enjoyed being in TV, and got this great job at CBS Denver, an internship with a guy named the Troubleshooter. And he was like the on-air news guy that would go out and make sure that everyone was on the up and up, and people would call in with problems, and he was the troubleshooter. He went out and troubleshooted. Well, from a gig that I did with him one night in an undercover operation, I mean, I was so excited to do this. I got a job as a production assistant at CBS. And boy, I would just encourage all of you, and I know now you probably all know this, but just get as many internships as possible. And even if the internship is something that you're not even thinking, oh, you know what, I might not even know if I'm interested in that, do it. Do it. Even if it's for a few months. Some of these internships really changed my life and really helped me get to where I am today. I just didn't know it at the time. So I went from CBS Denver, where everyone was so wonderful to me, and put together this wonderful resume tape, which I'm not even sure I was that great of a reporter or anchor, but man, did they make me look great. And I sent that tape out to about 40 news stations or more across the United States, and ended up landing a job at KBP. At the time it was KPBI or KBPI TV. And now it's KBOI. So I couldn't even find the old logo, but same, it was the CBS affiliate. I don't really know why they changed call letters, but they did way later. And I was there for about a year and a half, and fairly quickly realized that the news business wasn't necessarily for me. Couple of reasons. I loved fairs and festivals and covering feature stories. Didn't love the murder stories and the meth stories quite as much. Loved the adrenaline rush. Didn't necessarily want to get woken up at 2 in the morning to cover the wildfires. So I also knew my next job was likely going to be in a mid-sized town, and I was going to go from my schedule being a fairly decent schedule that I worked up to back to working weekends and doing that all over again. So I kept interviewing these PR people during my job at KBOI, got to interview a few celebrities. I was super excited about that. Definitely interviewed a lot of politicians, but the PR people really interested me because I thought, well, wow, they get to kind of go to some of these fun events, and even some of the events that, let's be honest, aren't so fun, but they're dealing with it as the PR people. But there still is a little bit of that excitement and that adrenaline rush. And the news people and the PR people always were kind of together at these events. And I thought, well, maybe that's more what I'm cut out for. So sure enough, some of the biggest PR folks in Boise were my recommendations and wrote recommendations letter. Anheuser-Busch, Ore-Ida Potatoes, and some of the Micron, some of the big companies up there, Albertsons, and ended up going to Denver and moving back home. So you see on this slide, there's a big purple box that says ego hit. And I want to be really, really clear with all of you about this, because I thought that my life was going to end, going from being on TV, and I was an anchor where people would even recognize me in the grocery store. And I had to go home with the tail between my legs and live at my parents' house because I probably topped out at about $18,000 as an anchor reporter in Boise, Idaho. So I didn't have a lot of money. And I had to piece together some jobs, and boy, my parents were awesome to let me come on back and put up with me. But I got a job making more money at the local government access channel, Denver 8, than I had at the CBS affiliate in Boise. And yes, I got a waitressing job again to make ends meet. But I want to make this really clear today is that the ego hit that I took was the best decision that I ever made in my life, even though it was the hardest decision I ever made in my life. And I even had friends and my in-laws saying to me, because I met my husband right around this time, wow, you have a 4-year degree and you're working at an access TV station and waitressing? How embarrassing. Or maybe they didn't say how embarrassing, but in the back of my mind, I thought that's pretty embarrassing. No, it was awesome, because not only did I get the experience at that government access station where I met a ton of great people in Denver and started to really get my feet wet in Denver, I also started interviewing at PR agencies and other PR jobs. And it kind of freed up my time to find out what I really, really was more passionate about in my life after leaving what I thought was my dream job behind. So I interviewed with Webb Strategic Communications. Mr. Webb was he was a TV guy. He was kind of a curmudgeon in the market, but he only hired people with media experience. So that really solidified in my mind that, well, gosh, I'm so glad I have this media experience. It did land me my first PR job. And as a matter of fact, when I interviewed with him, he said, we really don't have any jobs opening right now, but because I had gotten an informational interview with him, which is also a fantastic thing to get as many of as you possibly can. And he said to me, in 6 months, if you don't have a job that you're in love with, I'm going to bring you over to Webb Strategic Communications if we have the client base that we can do that. Sure enough, you leave an interview like that and you say, oh yeah, sure you are, right? You're just trying to blow me off. You didn't like me. But we did make a connection. So 6 months later, he calls me up and he says, we have a job available for you. We just got the Colorado Department of Transportation drunk driving education campaign, which I ended up then working on for like 6 years. And we want you to come work for us. And I tell you, my starting pay there was not great either. But I knew that if I got my foot in the door, I worked hard, I showed up on time, I put as much extra effort into it as I possibly can before I had a family and I had time, that I'd move up. And sure enough, within about a year and he started me as an intern. Ego hit, ego hit, ego hit. Again, such a big ego hit. But I was super excited to be in my new PR agency job. I loved what I was doing for the first time in my life. I knew it was something that I was going to be able to do forever. And on top of that, I moved up quickly. And within a year, I was an account manager, moved up to a senior account manager. And then I was part of Public Relations Society of America, which I know some of you are likely part of PRSSA for the student organization. I started going to meetings and I met some folks there who told me that Ogilvy Public Relations was hiring. They're owned by Ogilvy and Mather out of New York. They're based in New York City, but had an office in Denver. And sure enough, they hired me as an account director and the director of their broadcast department, which was a huge jump for me. At the time, it was in the tech boom as well. And Alexander Ogilvy had just merged with Ogilvy. And so we had a huge tech site out of San Francisco that I was really excited to work on. And as I left Webb Communications, I said, well, I'm a package deal, and I brought my business partner along with me, and they were hiring like crazy, and we both worked at Ogilvy Public Relations and traveled, you know, on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. We were on a plane all the time, but I got to work with Fortune 500 companies and go on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with Quest Communications, and just had the most incredible experience, really getting my feet wet at an agency, and worked very, very long hours. I again, didn't have a family yet and was able to do that. And I was happy to do it because I knew that eventually my opportunity to have a family would come. And certainly that did at the end of my time with Ogilvy. And my business partner and I, she has 4 children and had started having babies as well. And our boss at Ogilvy was an absolutely wonderful woman who still is a super great support of us today and helped us get our feet wet with our own agency. And we started by really freelancing and getting clients. And the way we started our agency officially was we pitched the McDonald's business locally in Denver. And, you know, I think sometimes just something shines down on you, and you, whether it's luck or being in the right place at the right time. But my business partner and I must have done something right to impress them. And the one thing we said was, no, we won't work for the ad agency. We are our own entity. We have to report to you directly, because their issue was they had many, many PR agencies that had reported up to the advertising agency, and it never worked out. So we said, that doesn't work out. We know that from experience, and kind of the rest is history. We've grown our business from there and have been in business, like I said, 16 years. So again, the internships help. The jobs at all different levels helped. The sucking it up and going and taking that ego hit helped, even though it was a tough one. Not making too much money and living with my parents helped, because I finally found something I was very passionate about. And I guess if there's one thing, especially with communication degrees, you know, we might not be necessarily starting at a wage or a salary that is like a neurosurgeon, but hey, you do what you love and the money comes. And I truly, truly believe that. In my life, I've really felt that working really hard in my younger years when I didn't have those responsibilities of a family, and then following my passion and being very passionate about that has brought me, you know, to where I am today. So next slide.
So Debbie, before we move to the next slide, there is a question for you in the chat. I'll read it off for everyone. What is the difference between a normal interview and an informational interview that you mentioned?
Yes. So a normal interview, you go in with the expectation that it is for a specific job. You are there to sell yourself for that job. You bring your resume. Well, you do for informational too, but you bring it knowing, I really want this job and there is a job at stake here. Informational interview is when you, and it's really great because you can call anyone you want if you have the guts, which you should, because you are awesome, and you ask for an informational interview, and it just takes the pressure off everyone. So I would call everyone I knew and say, all I want is an informational interview. There is zero pressure to hire me. I don't have any expectations of you hiring me. All I want to do is talk to you about how you got your start in your business and in your position. And if there's anyone else that you can give me their name of that I can set up another informational interview, I would do that. So I did hundreds. I don't even know. Maybe not hundreds. I bet I did 50 PR informational interviews when I did my career change. And then of course, a few with the media as well, but especially when I was really transitioning to that PR job, it was a lot easier and palatable for other people also when they don't have, you know, it's easy to say, I don't have a job to give you, or there are no job openings here, but it's very easy to say, you know what, I got helped by so many people. Of course I'll do an informational interview with you and talk to you about what my job is like and how you get ahead in this industry. So We are Fitzgerald Peterson. We have business in all of these locations that we have here, except Oklahoma. That's supposed to be down in Texas. That kind of got moved around. But yeah, we started in just Denver and have grown exponentially. So it's very exciting for us. And we've never had to do a really big new business effort because we've done great work from the get-go. We've gotten recommendations from all of our other clients, and our name's on the door. We had a lot of talk about really creative PR names, and everything sounded so hokey. And, you know, we just decided at the end that with our names on the door, we were always going to be uber 100% accountable for every bit of work that we do. And it's worked out great kind of with that philosophy. Next slide.
There's one more question in the chat, and feel free, Debbie, to answer it now or after the next slide. What are some writing roles available within PR?
What are some, what?
Writing roles.
Oh, writing roles. Yes. So at Ogilvy Public Relations, which is a very large PR firm, I will talk from that hat because, and certainly we have that too, but we're definitely a smaller agency. There are editorial folks in the editorial group. We had like an actual dedicated editorial group who wrote all the media materials, press releases, bylined articles. So if we have a client that wants to do an article, and there are especially trade magazines out there that we would pitch and say, we have a client who wants to write an article for your publications, we would actually write that as the PR people, give it to our client, and the author would edit it and make sure that it's in their voice and everything. But lots of article writing. Gosh, we've even helped kind of ghostwrite a small book with a client. Let me think on that some more, but those are some examples. So what we say we are not Ogilvy PR. We are a medium-sized agency in Denver, but we are a big agency with senior leadership that has boutique attention. So the difference with our agency that we feel from a very large agency is that we offer the expertise of a big name agency, because we worked our way up to, you know, senior vice presidents at Ogilvy Public Relations, but we're able to have that attention to detail and ownership that comes from a personal approach. And with our firm, you get a partner with, you know, the senior experience, but also a lot of flexibility, sense of urgency, financial sensitivity, ownership of engagement, and passion. And I say that because, man, when COVID hit, you know, I think we did survive because we already worked from our homes. We did not have office space. That is something that was pretty revolutionary 15 years ago. And, you know, we would have even kind of mentors of are saying, oh, that's not going to work. You're going to have to get office space. It's going to have to be super cool, and you're going to have to spend a lot of money on it. And okay, maybe an ad agency needs that. You know, you definitely have different things that you need with an advertising agency, but with a PR agency, it's really worked out for us. And I tell you, just having that flexibility has been served us very well. So that's kind of describing Fitzgerald Peterson Communications. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about our clients, and then I'll go into what is PR versus advertising. I think that's confusing. My mother still sees an ad and says, that's such a cool ad you did. So I know it's confusing, and we'll get into that in a minute, but just a little bit about our experience, and I think why we were able to kind of open our own agency and have that credibility was really our big brand experience with, you know, brands like Quest Communications and Great Harvest Bread Company, Coca-Cola, of course. We did a lot of work for Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, Quiznos Subs. Quiznos Subs is actually how we got our McDonald's business, because someone there told us that McDonald's was looking for a PR firm. I mean, they were already 5 interviews in with agencies before we even knew about it, and they made an exception and had us in for the interview. So again, things happen for a reason. always go for it. If there's something that you can do that you think, oh, this might not even make a difference in my career, but it sounds interesting, do it. You just never know who you're going to meet and the kind of experience you're going to get. Next slide.
One question from Ron. How big is your agency and how do you maintain, and how do you maintain the size you want as personal owners?
Oh, that's such a good comment and question. We have the 2 owners and about 8 employees. Our model started out as only contractors, which also made us nimble and was a little less scary than hiring, 6 people, let's say, or even 4 people out of the box and thought, oh my gosh, now we have salaries and benefits and everything that we have to pay them. We also happen to know a lot of workers who came from Ogilvy who also went out and freelance as they were having families, and that flexibility served us really well. So that worked awesome, that we could have these high level, very senior people that were contractors, and we would give them a certain amount of hours a month. Since then, we've hired a couple of folks full-time and just hired someone yesterday full-time. So as our business has gotten bigger and we've gotten more stability, we've been able to do that, and that's made sense for us. We have an employee in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and an employee in Sacramento, California. And actually, the UC Comm alumni position I was in enabled me to post jobs and really network in California. And that's how we found our first employee in California. And then since we've had a second. But again, who would have thought? Okay, talk to Leslie, I'll become part of this alumni group, and then found a stellar employee, and everything just seems to happen for a reason. So that's kind of how that happened. But yeah, now we have about eight of us and growing strong. How we keep it at a manageable size is that my business partner and I almost share a brain. We are so fortunate to have the partnership that we do, because we both really truly believe in working hard, playing hard, and having a really great work-life balance and raising our children and spending time with them. So we have said no. Now, it's hard. It's hard to say no to clients. We've said no when we don't feel it's a good fit, more than it's a bit too big of a client. When we left the big agency life, we did make a pact with each other that we weren't going to work with folks that didn't share the same philosophy and values that we did. And that's really served us well. And so far, there really hasn't been anything that has come to us that we're like, oh, we couldn't do that. You have to really think about that sometimes. Would you represent a tobacco company? I don't know. Would you represent a casino? Would you represent, gambling past in Denver? And I don't love it. I'm not sure I would represent one of those companies that is always pushing gambling on people. It's all very personal. And some people would say, why not? That's not a big deal. Cannabis was legalized here. And, at the beginning, we were a little leery about accepting cannabis clients. We have worked and dabbled in it a bit. It's a whole new beast, and they only pay in cash, and it has been very weird. And so we shy away from that a little bit, and not for moral philosophies or values, more because of their business structure and concern about not paying our employees. So there we go. Next.
Very interesting kind of personal take there too, about how the intersection of the business and the personal, that you can think about that when you're your own firm, right? So absolutely. Very interesting to hear.
And when we worked for a larger agency, you're told, you are an employee, you have to work for this client. And there were definitely times when we probably would have said no to a client or two because of some of the ways things went down. So
very interesting. There's 2 more questions in the chat, but I'm going to keep us moving so we can get through your presentation. Right. So Gabby and Megan will be back.
Great. So I can move a little quicker too. Current clients, McDonald's, again, our biggest client. We started out with them just in Colorado. We now represent Colorado, most of Wyoming, some of Nebraska, all of New Mexico, and pretty much Bakersfield North in California, except for San Francisco. And it has been an incredible ride. And I will say we had worked with quick service restaurants before and hadn't had as good of an experience, not naming names. So when we took McDonald's on, we were very leery, like, you know what, life's too short. Let's just see how it goes. And I think the difference is McDonald's is owned by small business owners. So they may own 10 to 20 McDonald's or even 2 to 4 McDonald's restaurants. They are beholden to, you know, the corporation because they have to keep that brand, of course, on track with what McDonald's says and of course, what they serve and even some of their pricing. But we get to work with small business owners, basically, and awesome people who want to give back to the community. We work with Ronald McDonald House Charities because we work with McDonald's. That's been wonderful. I'll just pick out a few of these. Walmart, we work with them just in Colorado and mostly on their foundation stuff and giving money away to local organizations. The Denver Auto Show is finally being rescheduled after last year's cancellation. It's going to be in September. And that's more of an event related client where we'll actually go out and meet media out, you know, to do different live shots on their news shows and bring their spokesperson to stations. Cirque du Soleil went away, of course, with COVID. They say they're coming back. We're hoping. And Made Here's a client we just got. And that's owned by Clint Eastwood's son, Scott Eastwood. I'll talk a little bit about that. He was just here in Denver last week and we got to do a really exciting launch because we don't have celebrities in Denver. So it was pretty exciting. Next slide. So a little bit about PR, like what is PR, right? I'm sure some of you are like, I don't really get it. Is PR just talking? I have a lot of people who come to me and say, well, I'm a people person. I bet I could do what you do. It's like, no, I don't just talk to people, even though I like to talk. Public relations, really, in my mind, I like to say, is everything advertising isn't. We do not pay to do anything with news. Press is all earned. So we go straight to the newsroom and straight to the producers and we say, our client is doing this today. We are announcing that McDonald's new product is on the market and 5 cents of every, French fry sold is going to the Ronald McDonald House. Will you do an interview on the news with my client? So no, it's not an advertisement. It is actually on the news and tends to have a little bit more credibility at times. I think, there is an ongoing debate about the separation between church and state, which is, advertising and PR in the actual news station itself. And sometimes that gets blurred, but I will say a true journalist, absolutely won't accept anything, to have our client on their news show or to do an interview with our client. And let's hope it stays that way, right? Because we want to make sure that there is that separation. So we know that it's credible. We also do a lot of campaigning. We have clients that are political and we do get into a little bit of that, as well as a lot of promotions and with bloggers and some of the new social media platforms that have gotten very important over the last 10 years. Huge social media campaigns. But again, there's social media that's bought and there's social media that's earned. So on our side, it's all earned, and all the social media that we do is earned. We also do sponsorships. So I'll give you an example. We have a sponsorship with the New Mexico Public Education Department and McDonald's to put books in the hands of needy children and children who are economically challenged. So McDonald's will pay for this sponsorship and pay for the books. And we have this partnership where the Public Education Department is getting into the hands of these kids, and then we are able to talk about it in the media about our local owner operators caring about those kids in these markets that might not have a new book. So that's one example. We have a Denver Broncos partnership as well. That's on the advertising side. But then there's also public relations opportunities too. As a matter of fact, one year we did a pay it forward opportunity where we had Denver Bronco players in our restaurants serving food, and it was all for charity. So sometimes the ad world and the PR world really mesh together, and it does get a little bit difficult to understand what's PR and what's advertising, but that's it in the nutshell there. So next slide. So for our intents and purposes here, our services include all those on the left. I won't go into every single one of them, but certainly you'll see that there's just a lot we do. And when COVID hit, we were crisis communications 24/7. We didn't have weekends. We worked nights 2 in the morning. I mean, with 800 or so restaurants that we represent, plus our other clients like Walmart, which you know things happen there too, we have about 2 to 3 crisis communications issue a week. And sometimes 1 a day, sometimes 6 a week, sometimes none a week, which is an interesting week. We're like, what's going on? But at any given time, a crisis for us is any time a media outlet shows up at your doorstep and wants an interview. So, you know, that can be anything from someone claiming that they have a service dog and we know it's not, and they get in a fight with a manager and then they say they're going to call the media, all the way to the really bad stuff that, you know, we all know happens. So an example is, you know, there might be something happens at a McDonald's restaurant, which I'm going to use a lot, obviously, as an example. We are the ones that reach out to the media with a response, and an inquiry comes in, and we work with those local owner operators and corporate legal, because of course they're always involved too, because it's a large corporation. And 99 times out of 100, we provide a statement versus put someone in the hot seat on an interview. All of our interviews, we want to be pretty positive, because certainly that moves the needle for our clients in a big way, but putting them in front of a camera can be pretty dicey. We just never know what that reporter's gonna ask and what our client might say. Next slide. So editorial media relations, again, you know, talking about local owned and operated restaurants. Yes, even the McRib is a PR play sometimes, because people are so excited about that sandwich. We have coffee with a cop, you know, in our smaller communities where our police officers have felt a little bit underappreciated. We have coffee with a cop. In other markets, we have diversity events and talk about all of our scholarships that go to some of our underprivileged folks, and certainly college tuition assistance. We just did this launch with Made Here Beer. Again, Scott Eastwood is a co-founder of Made Here Beer, and I guess he liked Colorado. He came out and visited and said, with all your microbrews in Denver, I think this is a great place to launch. So our job was to go out and get all those interviews lined up for him, and he just did about 20 interviews last week with our local media, and that was really fun. Next slide. And then, you know, I really want to talk about influencing the influencers, because that is a huge thing that is part of our job. Sponsoring events. We have a 15-year sponsorship with all of the parent-teacher associations in all of our McDonald's markets, because they are parents. They want to help the teachers. This has been a huge opportunity through COVID with how much our teachers have been going through and teaching online. So we do virtual presentations and give them gift certificates and thank them for all the awesome stuff that they do. We had a partnership with the Denver Botanic Gardens for one of our clients where they had concerts, and you know, got to bring in a booth and talk about what our client did there. So you get the idea. You know, it's really important to have influencers in the market that say great things about your clients. So that's a lot of what we do as well. So I think that's it. If I'm not, oh, types of PR jobs. So this kind of also goes with what you were saying, what kinds of writing jobs. I would say writing is really important for every PR job out there. The larger agencies might have like that editorial media group that does all the writing, but I would say 9 times out of 10 in my experience, the PR jobs that I've had and that I know other people have, it's just so important to hone those writing skills and practice as much as possible and be really good at writing, especially news writing. So the types of PR jobs, of course, there's public relations managers, directors, chief PR officers, even at in-house jobs and corporate jobs with companies. There's publicists who you probably have seen on the red carpet with celebrities, or, you know, not even that high up with like celebrities, but publicists of books, and they do PR for book launches. And that's really a niche that I wouldn't take on because I don't have the contacts in that industry. Agency life, like we've talked about. Politics, a campaign manager or a lobbyist is very public relations oriented. And then nonprofit jobs, which is almost in a category in itself because there's so much fundraising and development that goes on with that. And depending on the nonprofit, you can maybe wear many hats as the director of a nonprofit, and PR and marketing is part of that as well. I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's more. So I know there were some questions. I'd love to answer anything anyone has.
Yeah, there were 2 in the chat that I'll just go back to. I wanted to make sure we got through your deck, Debbie, because it's so great. But you kind of started to answer this. Gabby had a follow-up to her initial question on writing skills, and then Megan also asked one very similarly around entry level. So I'll read them both, and then I think you can tackle them together probably. Okay. So Gabby says, to follow up on my original question, are there recommended roles to start at an entry level for someone who has transferable writing skills and experience? So, you know, how do I bring that in? And then Megan asked, do you have any advice on PR in the entertainment industry and how to approach it at an entry level? So a lot of interest, obviously, with our audience around how do you start to build those skills really early on? How do you bring what you have into an entry level role here?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think enough cannot be said for the internship. And I know it's really hard sometimes to not have a paid internship. I had a lot of non-paid internships, and yes, I had a night job and I waitressed the heck out of my life for about 5 years there. But I worked at Channel 4, that CBS affiliate, for free for 1 full year. And it was obnoxious. Even my father was like, this is disgusting. Like, I can't believe they're not paying you. But I knew that was my passion and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I was willing to do that. And it panned out for me. I think in the entertainment industry, I don't have as much experience in, but I would say that's probably the biggest thing that you can do is find a way to shadow people. I would even go in my informational interviews and say, can I just shadow you for a day? Can I shadow you? Can I just see what it's like? Can I buy you lunch? Can I just buy you lunch or coffee and pick your brain for 10 minutes? Whatever it takes. People usually are nice. And if they're not, you probably don't want to work for them, right? So if they can't give you 10 minutes of their time and they're in a senior level position, gosh, I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised because so many people help me out and let me do that. As far as the writing job goes, I think even an account coordinator position which is probably, like the lowest entry level position at a PR agency, which is, that's where I started. I started as an intern, then I was an account coordinator. Tremendous amounts of writing opportunities. It was great because I had someone to edit my stuff all the time. I had about 4 levels of people that, if you have a good boss, they're editing your writing. And, my first press release was atrocious. It was terrible. But I was able to sit down with my boss and say, well, why did you change the headline? Or, okay, here's what was track changes. Here was my press release. Really see what was edited. And man, there were probably 10 press releases a day at Ogilvy that we were, writing, and at least I wasn't writing them, but I was able to see what the beginning product was and the end product was. Media materials, messaging materials, corporate overviews, white papers that we would write about a company. All of that gave me opportunities to write. And I was atrocious when I started. I mean, I thought I was a pretty good writer, and as I kept working through that and learning what public relations and that news writing was, even for press releases, the better I got. And that's what it is. It's practice, practice, practice. And, you know, maybe you know someone who works at an agency who wouldn't mind editing, you know, and go in and say, hey, in your informational interview, do you mind if I try writing a press release and will you edit it for me? Why not? Put it in your, and then you have something to put in your portfolio that you can bring to an interview and say, hey, so-and-so who's awesome over here at this great big huge company, you know, helped me with this press release and this was my end product and I did, you know, I did a great job. So any way you can, you know, start building those skills, be creative. I think some of the things that, you know, are really important to me now, looking back on it, were the things that I thought were pretty insignificant, and they really helped me out.
Awesome. We got one more question in. Thank you, Rick, for that. I'll read it in a second. And then for those of you that do need to drop, I know we just hit the 45 mark a couple minutes ago. So feel free to drop if you must, but we will stay on and answer any couple last questions here. So just wanted to give that, that notice. So from Rick, fellow council member, thanks for sharing your passion around PR. How many people have reached out to you throughout your career for informational interviews?
Oh my goodness.
You have a number?
I don't. I mean, I don't know. So many. And I was helped so much. I never say no, never, ever say no, never, never. And I tell you, some of those people, I mean, I'm getting old. Some of those people that I had informational interviews 20 years ago or 10 years ago are in great positions. And we are now our clients. I mean, that's pretty cool when you see someone that you know, tried to help get a job and they rose up through the ranks and now are a client contact of yours. So, you know, my late father said, never burn a bridge. And man, there were times I wanted to. I tell you, you leave some jobs pretty mad, or at least internally pretty, you know, peeved off. And thank goodness I never burned a bridge. And there have been times that person's come right back around. It's like, wow, well, I'm so glad I didn't say what I thought I wanted to say. But not only that, really, I never say no to an informational interview because I know how many people help me in my career. So always ask, always ask.
I'm going to say you've done 93. That's why we're going to put a number on it.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for all of the amazing insight. It's just been very invaluable, and I really appreciate your time. I'm going to wrap us for the evening. Great. As we're about 5 over. Oh, Gabby just mentioned, just to clarify, it's a